Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our Tools for Living and Parenting series. And the purpose of the series is to introduce the public at large to some wonderful people who are doing great work that you might not know about. And the more information you have, the more tools you have, the better you prepared you are for life. Tonight, it's my deep pleasure to introduce Ms. Allison Joseph.
Wonderful people who are doing.
She is she's the founder and director of Jew in the City, but this evening we're going to be talking about Project Makom. I've always been fascinated by the program and the work they've done. I've had the pleasure of speaking to Ms. Joseph way before. I believe it was first at a parenting class in Teaneck. Was that right?
That is true.
Class,
I
right?
was a very talkative audience member.
I don't remember that. Yeah, well, the passion comes out in many ways, and yet you've been very involved. And the purpose of starting Project Makom, in a nutshell, was Makom means a place, and many people in the Hasidic world who were leaving the community were basically faced with an option: either stay or leave the community completely. And Ms. Joseph came up with the notion of creating a space where people would find a space, a makom, within the Jewish community. And I had the pleasure, just so everybody knows, full disclosure, I had the pleasure of addressing a Project Makom meeting a year ago. Ms. Joseph, how long ago was that?
Maybe a year and a half, something like that, yeah.
In Muncie, there were about 40, 50 people there, men and women. And they really found great solace and comfort with each other. I really found it a very enjoyable and meaningful evening. It's a real pleasure to have you. Thank you very, very much for coming. And I hope our audience will learn about your great work, and perhaps some people themselves might be interested in finding out more about it for themselves or for loved ones, family members of theirs. So tell us about Project Makom. How'd you start? How's it going now? What are your main activities, please?
Yeah, so I wasn't really aware of the ex-Hasidic phenomenon when I started Jew in the City in 2007. I was raised to dislike Orthodox Jews. I was a proud conservative Jew, but we thought like some Jews were just too Jewish. And then I actually connected with Orthodox Jews in my teenage years, and I saw that there were these wonderful, incredible people that were nothing like what I saw depicted in the media. They were kind, they were honest, they were living meaningful lives, they were enjoying the world. And I felt cheated that I didn't know that that existed in Orthodoxy. I thought that the only choices were to be like normal Jewish, which was not too Jewish, or crazy Jewish and be a horrible person. Once I discovered that, you know, this sort of balanced being a committed Jew, a halachic Jew, and also have a nice and meaningful life existed, I became more observant. I dragged my whole family along with me. I joined the world of, you know, Jewish outreach. I worked for some regular organizations, and I saw that there was this missing link, that people had these negative associations around the Orthodox Jewish community. And so I founded Jew in the City in 2007, harnessing the power of social media to confront those stereotypes and those negative ideas people had. So the initial idea was really to reach people like how I was raised and show them, here I'm a woman. I'm not being chained to a stove or, you know, a baby making machine. I'm, you know, I put a wig on my head for my own volition. I make my choices. I'm protected by my husband. So this was a very positive approach, and we were reaching lots of Jews that did not have much of a background. And many of them were expressing interest in becoming more observant, or at least beginning a journey to learn more. But then something surprising happened. I started hearing from people from the ex-Hasidic community who really didn't like me. They did not like the Jew in the City message. They did not like what we had to say. And many of them called me a liar and a whitewasher, and just totally rejected the version of Orthodoxy that I was depicting. Now, I
just want to be clear, Ms. Joseph, from what you're saying that the people who were formerly Hasidic and left Hasidic, had a Hasidic life, had a negative association with religion and Hasidus, and therefore was saying that you were this idealistic person who's
Correct.
telling everybody that religion is wonderful, and that's not the case. Is that my understanding you correctly?
Exactly. Yeah. And at that point, while I would, if I had to label myself, I would put myself in, the centrist community or right-wing minor Orthodox community. I've always had friends from a variety of communities. And I had seen people in a variety of places, from yeshivish to Chabad to Chassidish, who were living happy and meaningful, balanced lives, just like I was. And we really, have always tried hard at Jew in the City to show the range of orthodoxy and the positive, contributions and the positive ways people can live. So after several years of sort of these negative interactions, and the internet can get kind of nasty at times in comment sections, in 2014 something surprising happened. Instead of an ex-Hasidic couple telling me that I'm a liar and I don't know what I'm talking about, they followed me to a class I was giving in Muncie at Rockland Community College to a group of beginners. It was totally not Orthodox group, but they saw the post, they came to the class, and they said we were raised ultra Chassidish. The guy said that at 10, he had to stop playing ball. At 13, his secular studies stopped. They couldn't stay in that box anymore. That world didn't work for them, but they wanted to stay observant still. Could I help them fit into a community like mine? So my Yiddish is not very good. It's like from my...
I did not know that. I knew about your work. I didn't know that that's how it started. So they reached out to you asking, can I have some of this world talking about? Is that
100%. They literally followed me to a talk that they were, not that they were uninvited, but it was not meant for them. It was meant for Rockland Community College students. It was an outreach group, and they saw me post about it online, just like, oh, here's my next speaking gig. And they were motivated enough to show up, find me at the end, and ask me, can you help me? So I didn't actually know what I was getting into. I had no idea what this entailed. Being the idealistic / stupid person that I am, I was like, sure, I kind of just like fall into things, like step into things that I don't know what I'm getting myself into, which I would say is generally, is a blessing, because I think for people that know too much or think too hard, they're probably too wise to do like foolish things. And then having seichel maybe stops them from daring to do absurd or things that should rightfully scare them. So it was first like, come join me for Shabbos. I'll show you my community. They actually left before I was able to give them follow-up information. Someone interrupted me. I looked up, they were gone, and I felt horribly guilty. And on the way home from this talk, I started calling different people in different mainstream Jewish organizations. And I said, I think there's a problem. I think there's a phenomenon of people that don't fit into one community and want to find place in another one. Like, could we do something? And everyone started telling me, oh, you're crazy, Allison. Oh, you're stupid. You're going to get put in chayrim, and, where are you ever going to get funding for this? So I sort of tried to not think about it for the next.
For the record, I've heard that a time or two. It's sent my way too when I spoke about child abuse and things of that nature. Don't worry. It's all good.
It's good company. So I tried to just not think about it for the next several months. Every so often I would feel guilty, like I lost this couple, whatever happened to them. About 9 months later, I read an article from a woman who had left Monroe. She had spent 3 years trying to acclimate into Muncie and sort of into the yeshivish community. Nobody would take her kid in their school. He was considered ex-Chassidish, Yiddish speaking, on his way down. Nobody invited them over for Shabbos. Her son was so lonely, she actually started paying a neighbor to play with her son on Shabbos. And after 3 years of feeling like a total reject that nobody wanted, she said, to heck with religion, I'm done. And she left observance. So after I read this, I realized that, here the From community gets all up in arms about footsteps. Oh, we have to do something. We have to stop this, off the derech movement. And I realized, well, maybe some people actually didn't want to leave. Maybe some people actually wanted to stay observant. You just weren't noticing them. You just weren't seeing their need. You weren't making space for them in your world. So it was really from there, this initial idea of seeing this couple that asked for help and seeing this woman that was really attempting to fit in and felt like nobody wanted her, that I approached my board and I said, I don't know how we're going to fund it. I don't know how we're going to do it. But I think this is actually what our mission was to begin with. I think this is, our initial idea was to break down stereotypes about Orthodox Jews in order now to include this group of people that grew up with negative feelings about Orthodoxy, not just those who read it, but those who felt it. So now we call it reversing negative associations about religious Jews. That's how we broadened our mission. And the way that we reverse those negative associations is by returning to, I would say, 3 of the most authentic sort of principles that should exist in every community and do exist in every community, but sometimes people don't get to experience them in their life situation. And those principles are menschlichkeit, ehrlichkeit, and seichel. Kindness, honesty, and thinking. If you have those principles in any derech and any community, it can be a great place to be a religious Jew. If any or all of those principles are missing, it could be treacherous and horrible. And so that's essentially what we're doing. We are...
Like, if I can interrupt for a second, Ms. Joseph, the Kotzker Rebbe supposedly said that the Rebbe of Kotzker, one of the first Ger Rebbes, he said that the pasuk says, "Va'anshe kodesh tiyu li," you should be holy people. So the Rebbe said it first says anshe, first be a mensch, and then be kodesh. That was his line. It was essentially what you're saying. He said, "Va'anshe kodesh tiyu li, koydem mensch, nuchtem heilig." Be a mensch first before you go to spirituality. Go ahead.
100%. And by the way, this actually, this speaks to one of our principles. We're not a social service or a mental health organization, and we don't actually believe that a person should be worrying about religion if they're missing some of those basic things. So if someone comes to us and they're homeless, they don't have food, their mental health is spiraling out of control, we refer them out immediately to mental health and social service organizations. We don't think it's responsible to be worrying about, does God exist if you don't know if dinner exists? We don't think it matters if you can reconcile science and Torah, if you don't know where you're going to sleep tomorrow night. So we basically tell them, get yourself stabilized with, some of the great resources that are out there. Once you're stable, then please come and contact us again. And then we can talk about that next stage. Actually, Maslow's hierarchy, I learned that term at your
I was just waiting. I didn't want to interrupt you. That's
Learned
exactly what I was going to say. Maslow would say that they're missing the lower levels. There's no way they can concentrate.
Correct. So I learned that at your class. So that's the chachma I learned there. And so what we're offering is, the first thing is the community for our members to be able to talk to each other. They are finally meeting people for the first time in their lives. People have told us they've never said their inside voice out loud before. The fact that we tell them that questions not only are allowed, but they're welcome, that there are no bad questions, that they can tell us that they have doubts, they feel so freed. I mean, their own spouses don't know, these questions that they have. So we have social events, which means malava malkas, barbecues, hikes. Obviously, this is all in pre-coronavirus time. We do a lot of Zoom these days, but the social piece is a huge part. We have Torah classes. Now, a certain number of our members are not ready to confront Jewish sources yet. They still feel very triggered and traumatized by learning. But for the ones that feel ready and like they want to go back, what I've found is that, again, the happy people are staying where they are. The happy people don't even know who we are, who I am. That's great. That's wonderful. We don't need to be known. We're really here for the people that, have had negative experiences in their communities. We found even that, if they don't have proper teachers, words of Torah that should be beautiful can be twisted. And so it ends up with, horrible meanings. Their conception of God is, this terrifying monster. The first Shabbaton that we did was I connected with that couple after I launched Project Makom essentially through a blog post telling these stories about the couple that I lost and the, mother that was trying to fit in. And then the couple found me and they said, hi, we were that couple. They did come for Shabbos eventually. We had a Shabbaton in their neighborhood at Lipa Schmelzer Shul. And I will never forget a woman that I met there said to me, of course I believe in Hashem. He's the boogeyman waiting to strike me down. And I felt like, what is this? And I've only heard, more and more of this as we've gone along. So we do the social events, we do Torah classes, we do career-based events. Because again, our model at Jew in the City has always been, you can have the best of both worlds. you can be a very serious, committed, halachic Jew, and you can also have access to the kosher parts of the world and enjoy it, and be a knowledgeable person, have, you know, a satisfying and you know, successful career. So we show them people, you know, who have gone through their pathways of education and have gone, you know, gotten better secular educations and have made careers that they're proud of, that they can make good money. And we also do Shabbos placement and Shabbat tones, which I would say hands down is our strongest piece of programming. Unfortunately, on hold right now during coronavirus, but in the Shabbos experience, I mean, obviously we know that Shabbos is just a powerful, you know, thing in and of itself, but what we've seen is that number one, they get to see happy and healthy Judaism modeled for the first time in their lives. They get to see happy and healthy marriages modeled for the first time, happy and healthy parent-child interactions. And they also get to be enveloped in the love of a loving and healthy home. They get to just enter a space and be, yeah.
No, finish, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. So they get to be enveloped in a home where they are unconditionally loved and not judged. And we really see that so much of what has pushed so many of our members out was so much judgment and conditional love. And when they come to us and we tell them, and we're very, you know, careful about who we allow in as hosts. We have to know them personally. You know, even if someone in theory looks good on paper, we do our best to try to find a way to find out someone who knows them and it's possible we are passing up hosts that are great people, but this is advice that we got from, you know, an advisor who's super smart. We have to make sure that we really can vouch for them because they're in such a vulnerable position, and we need to make sure that the hosts are people that really are there, that have the ability to give in an unconditional way, and they're not coming to them in any way with any sort of need or any sort of their own desire, but really there to help them just feel loved and experience Judaism on their terms, and take what, you know, they want to take, leave behind what they want to leave behind, but really let them, for the first time in their lives, have that choice.
Yeah, and you know, my experience, I've been dealing in the, for lack of a better term, you know, the ex-Chassidic, the folks who were in Chassidish Kehilas communities, and it just wasn't right for them. And let's be honest, you know, all of Orthodoxy, in a sense, is you're conforming to the Torah, and Chassidish, you're conforming to more social norms and the like. And for people who are, you know, just their personality profile, their rule followers, you know, it's fabulous. And okay, you know, you have the folks who are, you know, much more individualists or doing their own thing. It can become very burdensome. And I've actually had conversations with leadership people in various Hasidic groups, and had very candid discussions about, you know, what to do if somebody's it's not working for them. And they're very honest. They say, look, you know, we fully support if somebody's living, let's say in Monroe or in New Square, or, you know, and it's not working for them, it's probably best for both that they go and find a different place. That landing zone is challenging, and that's the beauty of what you're providing. And, you know, when you said all the things you're providing them a community, because I find more in the Chassidish world than even in the general Orthodox population. There's such a communal bond in the Hasidic world, because like everybody knows everybody, and
right,
the families. We have married children, you know, in Los Angeles and Baltimore and Lakewood, New Jersey, and Muncie and Brooklyn, right? You know, and if I lived in New Square, if I was a Square Chassid, all our married kids probably would be within the shtetl, you know, so it's extremely close, and they miss it terribly. I had in One of Us, that film about the formerly religious people, Luza Twersky, one of the guys they interviewed there, he said at a Friday night meal, you know, I miss this very much. I'm going to miss it all my life. And I think that's just a wonderful thing you're providing for them by giving them this space. If I can ask you, Ms. Joseph, what does it look like? So I live in Monroe, and I'm just not, it's not working for me. And let's say I'm fortunate enough that my wife is in the same position. Okay, so we're both doing it together, which I clearly saw is not always the case in the group in the wonderful, wonderful people that I met at the Makom meeting here, that I lectured to in the Makom meeting in Muncie. But let's assume that we're both in this together. We both feel like a little bit out of sorts. So I pick up the phone and I call Makom, and
So it starts with an online form at projectmakom.org. We have a sign-up form. We try to get a background to, see where you're coming from, make sure it sounds like the right fit. And then from there, there's a phone call where we, get a sense of, do you have those things that we spoke about before of, shelter, a way to support yourself. Are you able to carry on a conversation on the phone? We're a social group. So if someone, has challenges being in a social setting, that's something they're going to have to work on first before they can be a part of a group that functions so socially. So we might make a referral for, that piece to be worked on. But if all those things check out, then they're going to get a welcome call from Zeldi Treef, our program director. She grew up in the Chassidish community herself, had her own journey, lives in Passaic now. And she'll, kind of make that initial call to bond with them and, let them know what, Makom is about and a little about what her journey is about. And then people start getting invited to general events, the social events, the classes, the professional events. Once we've gotten a sense of someone, we never know the exact number, but if we've met them several times, spoken to them several times, and feel like we would know, how to match them for Shabbos well, kind of where they would do well in a home, then we elevate them to a member plus status, where they can now start being eligible to get, a place for Shabbos, all in pre-Corona times and hopefully post-Corona times. We also have spent a lot of time working on a code of conduct, because a lot of people in the community that are coming to us never really were around people of the opposite gender. That just wasn't something that came up. And sort of one of the things that we're trying to acclimate them on is, sort of appropriate speech. What does it mean like to, now that you're speaking to someone of the opposite gender, what are, things that we say or don't say? So we spent several months last year working with lawyers, mental health professionals, and Project Makom members to develop a code of conduct so that we could really create a safe space and then people would understand what appropriate boundaries were. And we have people, so amazingly, the Project Makom members become their family. We have one woman who, she had never gotten her name on a birthday cake her whole life. And on her 27th birthday, I believe it was, her Makom family threw her a birthday party and put her name on the cake. And again, you can go through life and not have that, but it was such a touching detail that she didn't even know she was missing. And many of our members also become super close with Shabbos hosts, and they sort of become surrogate parents to them. And what we've seen, look, we did an early Shabbaton, our first single Shabbaton a couple of years ago, we did in Highland Park, and the topic of God came up. And I saw several members that their conception of Hashem was just, there was so much pain and terror associated with it. And I knew that their relationship with their parents, with their flesh and blood parents, were not that great, and their parent in heaven was not that great. And I was really struggling, like, how do we help people that are, have no model of a healthy parent-child relationship get one? And what we've seen now is that when our members go away for Shabbos and see these loving parents in these Shabbos hosts, they can now start to change their association with what their parent in heaven is like, and heal their relationship with God.
That's so nice. I love that story with the cake. It's so telling. So they get acclimated and they get in. I mean, what would you say, at what point, I guess, at what point would you say, like, your mission accomplished? I don't want to get on the political world. That's considered to be something you don't say.
Yeah.
Not wise to say. Is there a mission accomplished in Makom?
I mean, I think what we're hoping people, we were trying to design an entrance survey. How do you feel coming in? It's a very complicated thing to design an entrance survey, because if you say to someone like, how do you feel about God? If the word God triggers them, they're like, oh God, I don't even want to talk to this organization. But it's sort of like, how bad do you feel about God? Okay, maybe I'll do your survey like that. Essentially, our check boxes are, Do you feel like you have your place in terms of community, in terms of a rabbi that you can trust and respect? How's your relationship to Judaism? It's really sort of like all the points of being a healthy and happy observant Jew. Can you check those boxes off? Now, this is a many-year process. So for some people, you know, they're just getting out of an abusive situation that they're living in, or just a toxic, you know, whether it's a community or neighbors or something like that. Even having, you know, friends to go to, people to be able to communicate with, and have a place to be able to share your feelings in an honest way. For many of them, that's like box number one. For some of them, it will also include changing their physical location. For some of them, not. So, you know, I think it sort of differs from person to person, but I think for us, sort of and I will also add here that we don't get to make decisions for grown adults. While we are proud and happy from Jews, we do believe in Bechira. And if somebody, you know, chooses to go back to the community that they came from and decide not to change the Makom, that's their choice. And if somebody chooses to leave observance and decide that they don't want religion, that's also their choice. So, you know, while our mission is to help people, you know, that grew up in the Haredi world find a Makom within Orthodoxy, if people choose other things too, like, you know, we don't have any negative feelings or any, you know, agendas for how they should be, but sort of what we can offer, or what our organization, I guess, will, you know, fulfill its mission best in, is if you would speak to them, you know, through this process and say, do your kids have a school? Do you have a rabbi you can trust? Do you have a set of friends? Do you have a place that you can belong? And do all that and feel good about being an observant Jew. So again, it's certainly not a quick fix. It's certainly, it's a process, but you know what? A healthy Baal Tshuva is also a process. For these, you know, Bali Tshuva that, you know, quickly, you know, overnight flip out and change completely. And by the way, that's another principle that we have: slow and steady change. This is what I've seen. You know, I thought, we weren't sure how to do this exactly, but if someone is coming to us straight out of New Square, I'm not sending them to Teaneck for Shabbos. I mean, if they insist on going, we would send them. But what we would say first is, go visit someone in Muncie. Go visit someone, you know, modern Chassidic in Muncie. Or if you're coming from Williamsburg, go to Borough Park first. Because if you want to choose Teaneck at the end of the road, fine. But why don't you see if there's something just a couple degrees from where you're starting that could work for you, that could be a good fit? Because it's going to be a lot less traumatic to change yourself in such a dramatic way if you can find happiness closer to home. So again, we don't tell people.
I always used to tell my students, my talmidim, that the you know, the visual image that the Torah projects of spirituality, you know, is one of them is, you know, Yakov Avinu's dream that he had his ladder. The ladder was in the ground, and the head was in, you know, the top of the ladder was in the heavens. And of course, the metaphor is for people that we have a feet, right? We have our feet grounded in this world, and our minds should be in heavenly pursuits. So I always tell my students that the message of a ladder is because you can't run up a ladder, right? It doesn't say there's a stairway to heaven, you know, the path to heaven, because I said you can't run up. In fact, I had, over the years, I've had fascinating discussions with top people in Eshet Torah and in, you know, other here in Muncie, you know, some of the wonderful Kiruv organizations, and the top ones, the good ones, strongly discourage these quick movements, because it does exactly what you said. It doesn't stay. And what you're saying is, if they're leaving Chassidish, they should also do this in a measured way, and not crash like that. That's fantastic advice. Really fantastic advice.
Thank you. What we also have seen is that if someone comes to us already, you know, not observant at all, we cannot bring them to someone Chassidic. They will be completely triggered.
Totally turned
So
off.
Now, by the way, a lot of what we did, we learned on the go. So my initial idea was, we'll just start them all off, you know, the most to the right, and then sort of, you know, move them along for Shabbos. If they need more to the left, more to the left. And we saw trial and error. We sent a woman that, you know, did not want to be with the family. It was an open-minded family, but the exterior was triggering for her. So part of the problem of, you know, not being afraid of trying crazy things out is that, you know, thank God she's doing great now. It wasn't a bad Shabbos. It's just, I did learn then that for a lot of people, even the outer visual associations is enough to make that sort of not a good fit for now. The interesting thing about this woman is that once she did some healing with herself and her relationship to Judaism, she can now go back and have positive feelings about Chassidish Jews when she sees them. It's still not for her, but she doesn't sort of hold those, I would say, negative feelings that she did before. And I would also consider that to be a success because, again, where they end up is on their own. But I think, you know, when you experience something that's negative in the community and you don't want to be there anymore, it's very easy to be black and white. We're living in a world right now that's so black and white about everything. To be able to sort of separate out your negative experience from, you know, all other Orthodox Jews or all other Hasidic Jews, and sort of have a bigger picture about what went wrong, you know, what could go right, you know, how things are for other people.
May I ask you, what does it look like when, I mean, I gave you an example of a couple coming together. What does it look like when just one of the spouses is feeling totally out of sorts and needing to get out, and the other spouse, the wife or husband, is deeply rooted in the community and they got children? I know we were just, you know, offline, you know, before we get on this about our own experiences with that. I've been often asked to mediate situations with children in custody, and it's so complicated. I mean, how does it work in Makom? If a woman comes in and says, look, you know, my family's there, it's good for them, everybody's happy, I just have to get out, or vice versa, how does that work?
So, you know, I would say there's two different ways that story can happen. One version is the spouse knows, and one version is that the spouse doesn't know. Now, it's really, you know, for a lot of people that are coming to us, they met their spouse one time for a very short time, and weren't even so happy about the marriage going forward. So this is, I would say, probably one of the things that makes me the most uncomfortable, you know, situation of, you know, the spouse coming and the other one not knowing, because that's certainly not how my marriage runs, and I wouldn't want my husband to do that. At the same time, we understand that the person coming to us is trying to hold on to Judaism. If they didn't come to us, they would, you know, quite likely try to leave completely. So I would say for the person whose spouse doesn't know they're coming, that is the hardest person for us to reach, because they're even afraid of participating too much. They're afraid of coming out to events. They're afraid of, you know, people knowing too much about them. In terms of, you know, if we had to sort of categorize, because we have everything. We have single, never been married. We have divorce, no children, divorce with children, couple coming together, you know, one person is interested if the other one isn't, but knows about it. And then you've hit the nail on the head, the one person coming by themselves. If the other spouse knows about it, you know, we had talked about also, again, pre-corona, trying to do maybe a Shabbaton where we could have like mixed marriages, you know, come together and talk about, is there some middle ground where, you know, if one side needs a little more space, but the other side needs to stay Chassidish, is there some community or some room where they could meet and stay together? Not all marriages, you know, are able to survive. If it's two people, you know, willing to work on it and, you know, be healthy with each other, obviously we'd like to try to help the family stay intact. But these are some of the most challenging situations that we face. Yeah, and then the thing is that I would say, we don't have all the answers, but that's never stopped us before. We sort of work.
But nobody does. All you can do is try.
Yeah, we think, you know, for the person to at least have a place to be able to go to and be real and have other, you know, humans to hear them. Look, we had one guy that came to us. He was actually, the wife did know that he was coming to us, but he was actually able to return to his family. He had some, you know, some childhood issues that he was working through. He was on the verge of leaving religion completely. And he spent some time, you know, talking to other members and kind of working through some of the hurt that he felt around his experience growing up. And he was able to then go back happily to where he came from. So we also, by the way, we also find that to be a success as well, because really the idea is to have, you know, a makom within Judaism that you can feel good about.
Right. And I mentioned to you when we were speaking earlier, you know, as far back as 20 years ago, I asked, you know, I have top leading gedolim, our sages that I asked for advice, and they were totally and completely in favor. What I found in many situations when the marriage is not going to work out, and they wind up getting divorced, what I actually found to work best, if they can get along mutually well, they don't need any of us. They'll figure it out themselves. But in cases where there's such stress, I found often that moving the Hasidic, the one who's still religious, to a less Hasidic neighborhood, or a Batilumiyam, an Orthodox neighborhood, or somewhere in between, often wound up being, for our listeners, I think it's important to know that there are solutions. It's complicated, but I found that when they go to, when the religious spouse goes to a less Chassidish environment, and by the way, I've spoken to heads in the Hasidic community about this and gotten their sign off. Obviously, there is no one solution for anything, and each case is separately, but I've gotten in many situations, I got a very warm encouragement to do this, because what happens is the kids go back and forth between the parents, and it's like going from the freezer to the, to 90 degrees. Right. And like this, that there isn't that much of a move. When the kids move back and forth, their lives are not that complicated. The spouse that's not religious will be more comfortable signing off on a school where the kids will get more of a general studies education and a more progressive, there's a disciplinary mode. So, there are models that work, and I think I'm so impressed with your work. Really, I remember, when you were thinking about it, and we had a few conversations, and I have a lot of nachas watching hearing about your work, and my interaction with that group in Muncie was really memorable. I went over for a 20-minute talk, and I stayed for 3 hours. They're really wonderful people, and they're just trying to figure it out, and it's not for everybody. I had a Chassidish, maybe I shouldn't say this in public, but I had a Chassidish kid. I know you'll appreciate this, Joseph. I had a Chassidish boy who was really doing his own thing, and he wasn't, as we say, he wasn't playing school well, and the principal was very frustrated. And I pleaded his case. I called up and I begged the principal to take him back. He's afraid we're friendly, and anyway, he said, "Look, Rav Yankel," he said, you see this kid. He's not bad. It's just not right here." Anyway, so I told him, I said, I have a kid who might be right for your yeshiva. His name is Yisrael, and he has a hard time sitting in class, but he loves to walk into the forest and talk to Hashem. He's the most spiritual person in the world. Do you think it would work? And he said, "I'm not so sure." And I told him, I said, "You just said no to the Baal Shem Tov." His name was Baal Shem Tov. I said, "You just rejected the Baal Shem Tov." And he, to his tremendous credit, he cracked up and he said, "Send them back. I'll give it another try." So it's not for everybody, and I really admire the work you're doing, and your volunteers and your staff. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, reach out to?
Projectmakom.org is our website. We have contact pages there. And I think what's interesting to note also is that besides the people that we're helping, up close, about 170 members, we are hearing from people that are consuming our content at Jew in the City, are watching our videos, reading our articles. I found out that
the website there. What is the website there?
Yeah, jewinthecity.com. I found out that we had this group of huge fans in Williamsburg, these Chassidish guys. I never created this website for guys in Williamsburg, but they told me that we were thirsting for meaning behind our Yiddishkeit, and we found you in the city, and so they never reached out to Makom. They sort of found their own way, sort of maybe they're neo-Chassidic, something or other. But what's really meaningful to us is that for the people that need, sort of more hand-holding and more of a formal community up close, we have Project Makom, for them to join. But just for, more general hashkafa and to deal with the questions that a thinking person would be thinking about, living in the world today, current events, how to make sense of it, how to deal with, challenging mitzvos or halachos or parts of the Gemara. what I find so exciting is that in our chat, we have a very robust Project Makom chat. Different topics will come up, and I will just link to different, places that we covered this, on our website, because we really have put a lot of time and effort into getting into the heads of what should trouble you if you're thinking. So, so I would say the people that we're helping, are in the thousands in this community.
Yes, absolutely. And the educators out there, the mechanchim and mechanchos out there, I think there's a really powerful message, whether you're in the Chassidish world, in the yeshivish world. How many girls go away to seminary after 12 years in yeshiva, in girls' day schools, great girls' schools, and the head of the school gets up and says, you can ask any question you want, and it's the first time in their life that they've heard that. It's not only by Hasidim, yep. It's really in every segment that I think the broader assumption, Ms. Joseph, I think the assumption is that we educators think that every child in a seat is a customer already. Mm-hmm. That every kid sitting, every boy or girl sitting in our day schools, well, their parents are religious, they're in, and we don't have to do any marketing. All we need to do is teach them Torah. And then they come off to Israel. The same experience that you're describing is really very similar to what people have, boys and girls, young men and women have in our own schools. And the educators out there that are listening, I really encourage you to, or parents, listen to your children, ask them if they have any questions, make the type of, create the type of environment that that kids can come and talk to you. Just before we close, this series is called Tools for Living and Parenting. We have a fascinating interview coming up Wednesday night at 9:30, a real tzaddik, Alexander Rappaport, who runs Maspia, feeds thousands of people, families every week. We're going to be talking about Corona, how it's hit finances, and he's going to give practical advice for people who want to contribute in a creative way, or people who need financial resources. So we have a series called, and Dr. Twersky is on next Monday night. And we're also, we finished part 2 of a 6-part teenage series. It's separate and aside from this. It's called Deep Dive into raising tweens and teens. It's really turning into something fascinating, and I'm loving every minute of it. It's a real growing experience together. You can look it up. All of these are on YouTube. This talk will be on YouTube soon also. And if anybody wants to sign up to register for either of those 2 classes, just send an email to events@thebrightbeginnings.com. So again, it's events@thebrightbeginningsplural.com. Ms. Joseph, thank you so much. Hatzlacha in your amazing work. Hashem should give you wisdom and strength and seichel to accomplish your amazing work. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for listening.
All the best.